market activity in coming days is expected to slow even further on the back of the tight system liquidity in the Treasury Bills market. For bonds, however, the focus is on the mid-tenor papers, and traders at UBA expect winning sentiments to persist until a clear market catalyst emerges. Chuka Nwachukwu, the chief dealer and head of trading at UBA, joins me now for an update. Thank you so much for your time today, Chika. And let me get your assessment of the market this week and what we're seeing play out there.
Yeah, thank you, Ken. Market has been a little bit quiet, different from the past few weeks, few months. The reason being that we have serious liquidity issue. This system liquidity is around 32 billion deficit, debit, right? Yeah. And so that has really affected activities on the fixed income market. So what we've seen, like you mentioned, on the fixed income market, on the T-bill side, we've seen, people selling off, right? So those who had a bit of liquidity, we see them on activities on the February securities, which on the T-bill side. Yeah. But for the bond, we've seen a lot of major activities on the 29 and 33. Yeah. Those bonds, at the point we are trading around 21, 22%, and so it only makes sense, why most traders and investors, are selling off in order to make, maximum profits based on the yield levels now.
Yeah, interesting times in the market. You're talking about the yield levels here, but when you look at the performance of the third quarter as a whole, what was some of the key trends that you say stands out?
So on the fixed income side, we saw, DMO, systematically reducing the amount of matured T-bills as well as matured OMO, right? So what that indicates is that, look, they're not really so much, forced, or they are not pressed, I might use that word, in terms of, in terms of raising revenue, because of course the other source of revenue, raising revenue. So the key point is the decline in yield. So over 2 months we saw the yield decline by 400 to 500, some even 600 basis points. That is one of the areas that like I said earlier, the investors are taking advantage of. So those who bought yield around 21, 22 levels, it's the right time to sell. Knowing fully well that going into the month, end of the year, we see some form of elevated yield levels.
Yeah, because now looking at the global sentiments and what we're seeing play out here, everybody's anticipating that big meeting between Russia and Ukraine tomorrow, and then also the U.S. president has been quite vocal in terms of, the position of the U.S. Federal Reserve and who sits in that position. How would you say that is impacting the local strategy for fund managers here?
So for U.S. economy, obviously is a world power, and then of course the economy, is more like a benchmark to most countries, even especially developing countries, right? Yeah. So most of the pronouncement by President Donald Trump, especially as regards the Fed, chairman, kind of like rally the market initially, so we saw, market spike, to very high levels. But for, in recent pronouncements, market actually has priced it in, because at the end of the day, he hasn't got the power to, to sack the Fed chairman. And so market is just probably seeing it as one of those of his numerous statements. Okay. However, on the Russian meeting with on Ukraine issue, I think that obviously will also have its own effect because of, the interest. I do not see, any material decision in that meeting. And so generally that will affect, the sentiment on the market. Another thing again is on the tariff issue. So obviously it's affecting. Every country is being hit.
Uncertainty.
Uncertainty. In a way, for American, it's okay, because obviously the president is trying to, to reduce or, correct some of this, according to him, some of the unfavorable terms of trade. So for America, it's okay, but it's also affecting other countries.
Yeah, but then how do you then see the medium-term activity in terms of FPI flows?
So this year, especially, the FPI inflow has been very, very encouraging. So if you see between January and June, the total inflow, from FPIs, we are around $5.6 billion, right? And so that tells you, that they've been very active. And the reason, one of the reasons being the fact that, the government or CBN now, especially with the OMO bills, have continued to, to make the youth favorable. So that obviously will attract more of FPIs. The only problem is that these are short money.
Yes,
So for me, government wouldn't really plan with it because it's also affecting the FX side, because these inflows have helped generate more liquidity in the system, and so that's why we've seen stability on the FX side as well.
Yeah, because now looking at the direction for monetary policy down the line here, we're expecting inflation figures to come in by Friday. But your take on what we're seeing, what we can expect, and how is the market pricing that in?
So the last inflation figure came out at 22.22, right? And then that's why it only makes sense that on the OMO side, to attract investors, you have to up the yield. And so that's why we saw the last OMO auction came out around 23 levels, all in around 26, 27 levels, right? So that obviously has affected sentiment. On the inflation side, we've seen that inflation has been a bit stable. But then if you look at the core inflation, especially on the agri side, you see that it continues to rise. That's the food inflation now, It continues to rise, because of a lot of factors that are affecting it. One of the major concerns is the insecurity. So we find out that farmers, no longer go to farm, right? Those who go to farm, either get killed or something else happen. So that's also affecting inflation, the food inflation. So that is the area that needs to be looked at. And again, that is not a monetary issue. It's purely a fiscal issue. So, and that's why I've always said that, look, there has to be this handshake between fiscal policy and monetary policy.
And even trade policy.
Yeah, exactly, yes. So,
all right,
so that's one of the reasons why we think that inflation might not really, go up that much. However, I think the market has actually priced it in.
All right, thank you so much for your time. Definitely quite a lot to look at there. Chuka Nwachukwu, they're the Chief Dealer and Head of Trading at UBA.